about that. Here we go.
Oh, no, dude, no worries at all.
No, I know. I really appreciate you giving me the tips on that and working it out. Awesome. So thank you so much, Andre, for joining me. I guess we'll just jump right into it.
Awesome. Let's do it.
So Andre, you and I worked on a lot of promotions together, a strange amount for modern yo-yo generation is concerned, because basically none happen now. So you've worked on like a lot of the promotions that I've run, and they happen to be run with the toy store that you co-own with your wife, Devin Boulay, called A to Z Toys. What is the official name of A to Z? I keep just...
Yeah, A to Z Science and Learning Toy Stores. That's how we usually refer to it. So,
which, when I pitch yo-yo shows, I always, I posted a video of the yo-yo show recently, and there is a lot of science that is taught during the show, but it's predominantly 15 minutes of very cool yo-yo tricks, and then 10 minutes of me science accompanying them. But there's a really nice mixture of actual science and learning toys at A to Z. There's a lot that happens there. So
yeah, no, exactly. I mean, we've always liked to think that, we are science and learning at our core, but that we can still be science and learning and have fun. And that, I think in general too, most of the time when you're learning, it's best done if you're doing it through play or through activities that don't necessarily make you feel like you're learning. Like the best teachers are teachers that don't make you think you're learning something. You're just kind of learning it because it's fun or interesting because of the way they teach. So yeah, we're strong proponents of education through play.
For sure. And that's an amazing parallel, I feel like, to yo-yo, because so many of the best yo-yo players kind of get that good on accident. Like they just enjoy yo-yo so much that they yo-yo so often, and they become very good through, they want to learn more tricks, and they're just hungry to gain that knowledge. So that's really interesting. So I think the first time I came to the East Coast to do a yo-yo promotion, I mean, when I grew up on the East Coast, I was very young, but then as I worked at Yo-Yo Factory and I started to go on these yo-yo tours. Eventually I had to do one with A to Z. How have things changed from when we first started working together, and like how you see things kind of, I guess, going in the future, not even just with COVID, but you know what I mean? Once people are allowed to come back all the time for yo-yo class and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we kind of rebooted our yo-yo classes in the beginning of 2019, and a big part of it was just over the years as yo-yo evolved, the structure of our classes had originally been built when like responsive was kind of still how most people played. Not everybody got to the bind return. The last trick on the list was two-handed loops, and so there was a lot of things in our heads that were always important skill sets that kids had to learn. So like, for example, like teaching a kid how to loop the loop, like that was really important because that's a critical skill. And it's like, it's almost like that old man mentality where it's like kids these days need to learn their roots,
Yeah.
And I think we were really hung up on certain aspects of that. And so like coming into 2019, clearly like things have changed for so long now. And I was able to kind of look at it with new eyes and really, think about, okay, like what is truly the best way? What are the most crucial tricks? And also what is the least frictionless way to teach them in what order to keep kid on a path and make them feel like they're kind of getting constant support and like, kind of keep the enthusiasm going. And in order to do that, they have to be learning and kind of baby steps, but still feel like they're learning. So, we did that. We rebuilt our lists out. And I think we saw some pretty immediate success with kids kind of picking them up with a huge focus, obviously still on responsive play for like the core 15 tricks they learn in the beginning, gives them all the fundamentals, but then immediately kind of dropping responsive for unresponsive and kind of jumping head first after that. So, like they kind of learn all the way up through trapeze and laying it on the string. And then from there on, they're learning the bind and everything else. So I think breaking the presentation of tricks down as well into like responsive and unresponsive, which I know you've done, pretty well in your shows, and also just emphasizing like technology has changed and here is the bind return, presenting yo-yo as, what you think of as yo-yo with responsive and then what we know yo-yo is today. And this is what you can do with it, kind of helps kids to aspire to that.
Yeah.
So, it was a couple different things. Like it's trying to make it a really easy path. It's trying to make it easy to communicate it. And then I think, as you see too, when you go to schools and stuff, it's making it fun and appealing, and also like it's easy for the kid to stick with when you leave, you know, and kind of follow the path on their own,
Right.
so that when they can come back and see us, like they still have, hopefully, they've continued to learn even on their own, and stuck with it. Was there something else, another component to that question? Because it was a pretty broad question at the time.
Yeah, and I think you hit a lot of really crucial points there that I really like, and I mean that's something that I try to utilize with the first base as far as introducing people on responsive play, but then very quickly moving to unresponsive play. And it's interesting
Yep.
to see how many people buy one and immediately, even if it's their first yo-yo, switch to unresponsive play. And because I
No,
think
it's
like,
crazy, right?
yeah, people who take it upon themselves to actually go and research like what is the best beginner yo-yo, and then they read through Reddit threads or whatever, they think that they're maybe like a little bit higher of a skill level than they already are. Like I was a little kid like that. That's why I started yo-yoing, where it's like,
Oh,
oh,
we all do that. We
right,
all do that.
yeah,
We don't read instructions, and we like to think that, well, I mean,
yeah,
everyone else needs to learn this first, but I just want to do the cool thing. So,
right.
yeah.
And it almost makes you wonder if in the future we should skip immediately to just binds or not, because like yo-yo is such a it's such
Okay,
a
well, I
reactive
mean,
thing, you know, and for so
so
long we
so
followed the first sports ladder, and then now you guys have kind of laid out like a prototype of like what a second sports ladder could be, and what people have talked about like updating it to, and then you know
yeah.
it's
I mean, I think the big difference between, like, there's something to be said about just jumping to the bind, and
oh
at that point too, I've found it's very age driven too, and so, if you're old enough, you can kind of visualize what's happening with a bind. But I have found that kids under 12 years old really benefit from learning on a responsive yo-yo first, just because they can get some immediate satisfaction because they
yeah,
need to learn how to throw. And so a kid at 8, 9, 10 can throw and get it back to their hand, generally speaking, even if the yo-yo is like sleeping sideways and horrible. And I think that's the biggest difference, is like the kid won't understand necessarily like what's going wrong. It's just that the yo-yo is going sideways, but they can still
right,
get a sense of accomplishment. Whereas if you try and throw them right into a bind return right away, they're dealing with crooked sleepers that don't sleep, and then they don't even have enough time to get it back to their hand, or they're not throwing hard enough. And
yeah,
even when they do throw hard enough, it's at this crazy angle where you're like, dude, you're not getting that back.
yeah. I was teaching
So
people how to bind
I'm
sleep themselves.
I'm
Yeah,
still a strong, firm believer in responsive having a place, but we just don't want to draw it out.
yeah, and it almost seems pointless to be like, because if you can throw a responsive yo-yo, it's very quick to learn walk the dog, rock the baby, brain twister.
Yep.
Like you can teach people these tricks. Like if they're
Mm,
focused and it's 1-on-1 or even 1-on-5, like
right.
minutes, like they got all
Good.
these
It's good
tricks. And
positive reinforcement for
yeah,
sure. So
and if people are really that hungry to like get a yo-yo and learn, like they can probably learn from home in that amount of time, 25, 30 minutes maybe. I mean, like I was saying,
yep.
I was teaching someone how to bind this weekend, and that crooked throw thing came into such, like, I never thought about it being that difficult, because it's like, oh, you have like a whole minute. Even if you throw it like crap, you have a whole minute of a yo-yo to work with to redirect where the yo-yo is spinning, like on what plane. But like if you throw it and it's crooked and it's super stable and just staying there, and then someone goes to bind, it immediately is going all over the place. Versus like if you throw a responsive yo-yo and it's kind of crooked, you could still get it back, but then like you could adjust the kid's hand and be like, all right, you're actually going to throw it like this, and you got to make sure
Yeah.
that it's straight all the way down. And
You know,
there's a lot of
you also
right.
you can't underestimate the level of frustration somebody experiences having to learn how to wind a yo-yo up.
Oh my
So
gosh.
like minimizing the amount of wind means hopefully they're able to throw and get it back, versus like
That's a
trying to do a
great point.
bind and then also having to wind it up every time. And I mean honestly, like that's kind of the stuff I feel like when you have visited and we're working together and stuff too, I'm also able to see those things a little more clearly, because it
Yeah,
requires somebody like being face to face with people learning in the same kind of environment, where it's like you've got a ton of kids all from all different types of directions, both like in terms of life and just standing in front of you, and you're kind of seeing all the different ways they're approaching it, and that's what really helps you see. And again, it's a totally different thing than it used to be. I mean, the yo-yos are so good now, and you know, like first base is a great example. Like it's a great yo-yo to learn all those basics on, and you can jump ahead. But when you do really watch the kids learn the basics on it, and then you watch them jump into the bind, you can see that the path is solid for it. So
yeah, it's really great, and I miss doing that this summer, where you know, kids the first week at camp would be like throwing it up and down and automatically tossing it back up, and then a week later they have an unresponsive bearing and they're doing
I
fine.
mean, that's the beautiful thing, right? Is like when the time is right, everyone will be so hungry for it. So
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the second half of my question, which is the future, and I think we've touched on that a lot. But I mean, yeah, yo-yo is just so reactive in not such a good way sometimes, you know what I mean? We need to be more like proactive instead of reactive, and like thinking about how to steer people instead of like how to, I don't know. I guess because like yo-yo is such an old toy, you know what I mean? That it's hard to really gauge where it's going to go, or it's just, I feel like yo-yo does a kind of a poor job at forecasting itself for like, oh, like, you know what I mean? How long were we on this sports ladder for? And then finally you were like, okay, one day I guess I'm just going to change it. It was something we talked about for a long time, or you know, were one of the pioneers of wanting to change it, but it's just like, I don't know. One of my favorite examples of that is the year that Marcus Coe won Worlds, and then everyone was upset because Sebastian should have won. And then that was when we added the major deducts rule, where like if you,
well, I mean, I think he did have like four. I mean, there was a number of switches and restarts that was a little cringy for first place Worlds routine. Not to say he didn't deserve it, but I mean, you know, yo-yo is an interesting thing like that, where a lot of us who do yo-yo in a quote unquote professional manner, or in a lifestyle, so I do think a lot of us do yo-yo. You know, a lot of the people that go to contests and consider themselves to be like a yo-yo player or yo-yo enthusiast, like, you know, they're doing it because it's like part of the core, you know, person that they are, and they love what it brings to their life and stuff. And I think with that comes, like, it's a very different, yo-yo is two different things, and I've always had to remind myself of that. Like, there's yo-yo for yo-yo people, and then there's yo-yo for people that are new to yo-yo. Yeah. And you can't, like, you have to keep them in their separate worlds. And I think that's part of the problem, and why the evolution is always a little slower is, you know, the people who are motivated to try and push yo-yo are generally yo-yo enthusiasts, yo-yo competitors. And it's a completely different thing to be able to look at yo-yo through the eyes. And it's a lot of work, a lot of energy. It's a lot of thankless work often. Yeah, I mean, it takes somebody who can put their ego aside. And you know, generally too, it's like, you know, you're stepping up to this kid. He hasn't washed his hands. You just watched him pick his nose. His hands are so sweaty.
Yo, I wouldn't have cared about any of these things before 6 months ago, Andre. You know that.
You can smell the sweat, not on the hands, but you can smell the sweat on the yo-yo that they just handed to you, because they've been holding it in their hands, sweating, because they're so happy and excited. But you know, like, it is, or like my favorite other one is too, is like, somebody brings over the string, and the string is like, it was white, but now it's like gray, and the string smells, and so you're like, don't want to know where that string's been. I'm just gonna get you a new string, kid. Come on over here. But you know, it's like, not everyone's a teacher. Not everyone can handle that, I think. Yeah. And that's where you make the true evolution in the sport from the ground up. I mean, because the evolution of the sport at the top made sense. You know, oh God, you know, all those deducts, this isn't necessarily what we want to see at a first place freestyle. Let's adjust it. But to get people into the sport, you know, that's a game that you have to be on the ground, and you know, it's not, there's not always the opportunities. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that could be great teachers, and I think that's kind of one of the things that you've done a good job at too, is inviting people like, hey, I'm doing a demo in your area, do you want to come like hang out and do a demo? And like, oh my God, we need so many more of those people. And I look at, you know, COVID presents a lot of really complicated aspects that make that impossible right now, which is frustrating. And I honestly just fear like we'll lose like some of the best people at doing this. You know, you think of like John Higby and Brett Kunis and Dave Schulte, yourself clearly. You know, Mark Hayward does a bit of yo-yo stuff out there too. And I mean, there's countless other people that have relied on making this their career, and now all of a sudden they're stuck. And like we really, you know, rely on those people to help encourage the growth of yo-yo from the ground up, regardless of whether they're learning what is quote unquote the right way there, like we were just talking about. But we still need that aspect of it. So yeah, I mean, what you're trying to do too is like, oh my God, when things come back online and we can get back in front of kids, that we're not worried about the fact that they just picked their nose and we're touching the yo-yo again. It's crucial that we're ready to jump full steam ahead.
Right. And I mean, just like you said, every bit of that pie helps, like no matter what, if it's like serious enthusiasts, like lifestyle enthusiasts, casual enthusiasts, people first getting started. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I hope that it's sooner than later it reconvenes, yeah, for people, because, you know, people, everyone you just mentioned doesn't really have a brand that they can fall back on, so to speak, like I do with Recess, where I can make extra income that way, or with, you know, I know John doesn't like monetize his artwork as much as he should, but like, you know, he's like leaning on that a lot more now than he was before, and trying to sell more stuff or do more projects. And like, yeah, Dave doesn't have a lot of stuff like that. So it's, I really hope, yeah, for their sake, that sooner than later it comes back. But yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andre, for taking the time to talk for a few minutes about the future of yo-yo. It's so interesting you talked about like how seeing me teach people and how I do my tours like kind of gives you different ideas and juxtapositions on how to handle things. And like just talking with you for this 15-20 minutes really like put a bunch of different ideas in my head about things.
I should add real quick too. I think you're really special in particular in your approach to doing demonstrations, because not to downplay what you do, but I think what a lot of people, you know, when you see John Higby and you see Dave Schulte and stuff go and do school shows, a lot of times the school shows they're doing, like you said, and actually more like Higby does more of like an actual performance that's like a little bit different because he involves all sorts of things that aren't yo-yo and stuff like that. But yo-yo's at its core. And then I think the other approach is something like Dave Schulte does a lot of times, or Brett Kunis, which is like, it might be like more of like a motivational focus, or with Dave Schulte, you know, like he still brings a lot of science into it. And so like at its core, it's kind of like this motivational thing. But I think what you do that's pretty different is you really bring it to schools and an approach that this is yo-yo. And I mean, you'll throw in a little bit of those aspects, but I think you really bring it to people with yo-yo being the main focus of it, with the encouragement to the kids that like, look at what you can do. I can teach you. Let me put it in your hand. Let me teach you, which I think is kind of going back to like who we have that we can approach to help grow yo-yo. It's like anybody who's into yo-yo can do that, you know, and encouraging people to kind of step out of their shell and do that is, I think, one of your, you know, great qualities and how you've approached getting yo-yos in people's hands. So
yeah, I think I really appreciate it. And I think it just kind of goes back to you really harp on the re-education of people, as far as they think yo-yo is in this like box of, they already assume that they know what it is or what it can do. And even people who played yo-yo in the late 90s and might think like a ball bearing isn't a yo-yo, like for all intents and purposes, for 40 years, skateboards haven't changed, or 50 years now. And same with a lot of other of those toys that kind of meet in the same, you know, thing that people take those quarter life crisis hobbies where they're like, oh, I'm going to get back into that thing I was into when I was a kid. And it's like, oh, it's basically the same. Like this company still makes the skateboard truck and the skateboard wheels. This company still makes guitars or whatever. And then like, yo-yo, if you really want to get into it, it's like this over-engineered cluster machine of like, whoa, like you can get into it in so many varying levels now of, you know, there are people that we talk about all the time who literally a couple times a month are just like, oh, I'm going to buy a new yo-yo. What's the newest thing on the new releases page on Yo-Yo Expert? And then they'll buy one of the things that's in like the first 5 or 6 panels. But then there's people who are reading the forums every day and trying to figure out, what their favorite colorway of this next C3 throw is going to be. It's based off Simpson's favorite anime. But
The
yeah,
wild world.
yeah. But yeah, all those little sects are really important, I guess, not that I guess, they are very important, but they need to be nurtured, and like it's interesting to watch how we all do it in our own ways and keep it going. And yep,
Yep.
I'm excited to talk about it more and keep it going further. Thanks so much for your support, Andre.
Awesome.
And I'm excited to come back up north whenever the time is right.
All right. Looking forward to it. Hopefully sooner than later.
Thank you again.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.